May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom all, and welcome to our continuing lessons in this series entitled Understanding the Symbols or Symbolisms of the Theoretical Kabbalah. I am, of course, your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. We are using as our textbook a book by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto called in Hebrew Derech Chochmat HaEmet, the way of the wisdom of truth, also called Klelot HaIlan, the principles of the tree. An English translation is available by Rabbi Afilo or something. Hold on one second. It's not right to mispronounce his name. I gotta go back to the bookshelf to get the book. By Rabbi Raphael Afilalo. Rabbi Raphael Afilalo wrote the translation. And although I find his commentary to be severely wanting, nonetheless, for those who want to have an English text, it's available. You don't need to wait for mine. So, we've been laying down some principles in our previous lesson as an outline for this course. In the Hebrew language, we refer to this material as Seder HaHishtalshelut. Seder means the order of. Hishtalshelut means, if you will, an evolving order. Or, practically speaking, spiritual evolution. How one thing proceeds from the other. We are using Rabbi Chaim Vital's system of very, very arcane metaphor to help us understand, that's an intentional pause, understand what? Most so-called Kabbalists will tell you, he's talking about the supernal worlds. But as a point we made very, very clear in our previous class from the writings of the Baal Shem Tov, on the contrary, we are not talking about worlds out there somewhere over the rainbow, but rather we're talking about internal, psychic, psychological realities. And we find this not only in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, we find it in the teachings of his disciples, including the Magid of Mezrich, and we find that these teachings, regardless of an actual historical context or connection to Kabbalah, are nonetheless, if you will, universal truths floating around in the collective consciousness, and they were eventually picked up by the likes of Carl Jung, father of analytical psychology. Jung himself is even quoted as saying that his analytical psychology predated him in the writings of the Magid of Mezrich, who of course took from the Baal Shem Tov, who of course took from the Arizal. So, we are now following along this path of understanding, so that we can take all of these arcane metaphors and extract from them a realistic and practical and applicable understanding of, again, here's that dramatic pause, of what? Answer, of ourselves, of you, of me, of us. We're not here to talk about what's somewhere over the rainbow. If you want to know that, go watch The Wizard of Oz. But if you want to know what's going on inside you, what makes you who you are, and by knowing that, will you understand how to make yourself better, refined. That is what this is all about. That is what the theoretical Kabbalah is all about. That, mind you, is what mysticism is all about. philosophy, which is an intellectual discussion of abstracts without the benefit of experience, discusses and argues this back and forth. But unfortunately, the problem with a non-experiential philosophy, in other words, without an anchor to be grounded in reality, then philosophy can take you anywhere. Like a ship on the stormy seas, without it being anchored, you could end up anywhere. Philosophy, ideas, and beliefs, without a grounded foundation in experiential spirituality, a moral compass, they are the one and the same. Then your philosophy can take you anywhere. That has always been the history of the systems of belief, whether they're religious, whether they're philosophical, whether they're sociological, political, or the like. You can get to the point where you can intellectually, philosophically justify and encourage even things like genocide. It all makes sense from inside the bubble of the individual psyche. But we need something more than that. We need actual experience, and that is what the real Kabbalah was all about. Like I shared in our previous class, Rabbi Chaim, and after Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto and the like, the Kabbalists, would go into a meditative trance, and they would grasp some kind of vision, whether it be mental or visual, and write it down. Now here's something interesting. They themselves might have not understood the depth of what it is that they saw, even though they saw it. Needless to say, that could give rise to a lot of misunderstandings. Tonight, in this second class, we're going to proceed in our discussion of these metaphors. We discussed in our previous class the ultimate unknowable essence, which we call the Ein Sof. And we refer to this not necessarily as the existence out there, but as the existence in us. That domain which is even above, beyond the unconscious, the collective consciousness. This concept is something very well known and grounded in psychology, and even post-Jungians or Jung's contemporaries like Professor Erich Neumann from the University of Tel Aviv wrote about this in his book, The Origins, hold on a second again, quote it right, The Origins and History of Consciousness. Very involved, deep Jungian text, but for learning it's very, very helpful. We're now going to introduce the concept. Yes, and I call it a concept, a construct of the 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot historically are mentioned pretty much for the first time in the Sefer Yetzirah, give or take ballpark 2nd, 3rd century. And yet their names and descriptions are not demarcated, they're not expressed, they're not written down. They're called 10 Sefirot Belima, without essence. And essentially, the Sefer Yetzirah version of these Sefirot are based entirely on experience. In the first chapter of the book of Sefer Yetzirah, which talks about these Sefirot, actually is a guide to helping one deal with and integrate the experience of Sephirotic reality, the likes of which have been lost for the vast majority of later Kabbalists. They just argue words on a page. But we're now going to introduce from the system of Rabbi Chaim Vital, so eloquently summarized by Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in our text here, all different types of topics. So, with no further ado, let me introduce these topics to you from within our text, and then we will comment on them as we proceed. Sefirot, Pinimiut Vechitzoniut. 10 Sefirot, internal and external. Wow, that's already confusing. 10. But there are 10 on the inside and there are 10 on the outside. That means there are 20. Right? No! Wrong! We're talking about a symbolic metaphor. And what we're saying is there is a pattern. And it consists of 10 parts to the pattern. And that pattern exists in what we can call an introverted form and an extroverted form. Same pattern. However, one's on the inside, one's on the outside. Using symbolism that I introduced in the last class, one kind of looks up, one kind of looks down. One kind of is revealed, one kind of is concealed. Any of that sound familiar? Should. How about human consciousness? Isn't human consciousness divided in the same way? Human consciousness, part that looks out, part that looks in, part that looks up, part that looks down, part that is revealed, part that is concealed. The difference of the right brain and the left brain, or the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. But of course, you will have internal and external sefirot because you have an internal and external mind. You mean it's that simple? Yeah. Now, do you really have two minds? No, you have one mind. But your one mind is performing two functions. Well, don't I have two arms, a right and a left? Yeah, but are they like conflicting with one another, fighting one another? They're part of the one body. And that's the way you have to understand this. He continues and he states here, Dimyonam mar'e Adam. The image or their form is like the appearance of a man. Now here is where we get problematic. We're going to introduce this image of the man. Harishon Shebekulam, the first of all, is called Adam Kadmon, primordial man. So the first image of all existence, remember we just spoke in our previous class, God vacated a space for existence to exist, and He projected into this empty space a beam of His light, and the first thing it does is give rise to Adam Kadmon, primordial man. I have had people tell me what this means. That's a mention to the Son of God. That's a mention of Jesus Christ. And I roll my eyes. And I say, in all due respect, believe whatever you want. However, if we wish to be historically accurate within the context of the application of these metaphors, within the metaphysical reality of which they're referring, what you're saying is so absolutely, comprehensively, and completely wrong that it does not merit a rebuttal or a statement. I mean, if you want to, you could say anything about anything, right? Look up at the moon and tell me that's the sun. Doesn't make it the sun, but if you want to believe it's the sun, go ahead. If you want to look at it at night and say it's day, then go ahead. What can I say? However, there are certain fundamental principles which, in spite of your unique individual interpretations, does not make things accurate. What more can I say? All right? When it comes to understanding a concept, there is no person of, there is a concept of Adam Kadmon, who Or what is Adam Kadmon? I should play the Jeopardy music. Da 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 da. Make you answer. Who is Adam Kadmon? It's not a person. It's a construct. It's an image. It is us. The higher human self. This is something not unnecessarily ignored even in the Torah of psychology. I should call it the Torah of psychology, but even in psychology. There's a very interesting book for those of you who are interested in studying psychology called Kabbalistic Visions. C.G. Jung and Jewish Mysticism. It's written by a Professor Sanford Drob. States here on the back of the book that he's a core faculty member in clinical psychology at the Fielding Graduate University in Santa Barbara, California. Very interesting book. Very enlightening in his understandings and insights of applying Jungian concepts and how Jung understood this. It's worth just to read to you, even though he's going to jump the gun for us. Fine, because maybe it will help set the stage for what it is that we need to understand. I'm quoting to you from his chapter 9 called Kabbalah and the Development of the Psyche. On the bottom of page 137 he writes, Jung, who himself explored the Kabbalistic notion of Adam Kadmon, held that this primordial man is the archetype of man, the primordial undifferentiated unity of the collective unconscious and the goal of man, the conscious unity that Jung described as the self with the capital S. Adam Kadmon is the universal soul, the archetype of the self, again with the capital S, the process of transformation. He is man's invisible center, the core of the great religions, and of the self-archetype, the psychological equivalent of the Creator God. From a psychological point of view, the spontaneous emergence of Adam Kadmon from the unknowable void is symbolic of the birth of the self. However, at this stage, the self is far from complete. The primordial man must first embark on a journey of creation, the Sefirot, destruction, the Shavira, and restoration, Tikkun, before the archetype of the self can fully emerge. So, that is the journey that we are about to go on right now. Adam Kadmon. And it states here, continuing the language of Ramchal, Umema shenigbal bifnin yotzim arba'a chushim. And from that which is bound or limited within comes forth 4 different senses. Alright, 4 different senses, each a portion from him. And these 4 senses are sight, sound, smell, speech. Now, this is an introduction into what we're going to refer to as the profound secret of the lights that emanate from the ears and the nose and the mouth and then the eyes of Adam Kadmon. And oh boy, I've seen all kinds of imagery and discussions. We're going to sum up and explain that imagery like that to help you see just how simple, how real and applicable it is. But before we do that, we have to expand by first introducing a very common set of symbols in order to make this language accessible. If and when we want to learn certain types of math, you have to learn certain symbols. Now, the obvious basic symbols we all know. We know what a plus sign is. Looks like a little cross. We know what the multiplication symbol is. It looks like either a little X or a dot. We know what the division symbol is. A line, right? A horizontal line with 2 dots, one on top, one on the bottom. We understand these symbols. 2 straight line horizontal lines, and an equal sign. And there are a number of other symbols. Yes, we all know this. This is basic stuff. So therefore, if you would see a formula. Now, I'll say the formula to you. A with a little 2 on the top right. A little dot or an X. B with a little 2 on top of it. Line, dash, one on top of the other. C with a little 2 on top of that. Did any of you know what I just said? Let's put it in math language. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Any of you know what that is? You remember your high school or junior high school math? That's called the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagoras, he was very big into numbers and their correlations. So if you saw A squared plus A squared times B squared equals C squared, or another one, E equals MC squared. It's Einstein's famous formula theory of relativity. Now, if you want to understand the nature of the relationship of the angles and sides of a triangle, A squared times B squared equals C squared, does the shape of the letter A really have a significance? The answer obviously is no. Does the round curves of the letter B have any significance? Obviously not. Does the fact that the multiplication sign is either 2 lines crossed or a dot have any significance, relationship to the meaning of multiplication? No, it doesn't. If I want to refer to Einstein, E equals MC squared, and I have the letter E for energy, the fact that the letter E is spelled with 4 lines, 3 horizontal, 1 vertical, is that in any ways a secret symbol that reveals to me anything about the nature of matter? The answer is no. Well, if these principles are true with other systems of symbolism, why on earth would you think that this system of symbolism is any different? In order to speak of the different levels that we recognize and refer to in existence, or if you will, the divine light, which we call God, and we refer to God as His holy name, Yud K Vav K, because that's what God calls Himself in the Bible. So do we. Even though we don't use the name, of course. Well, we just introduced 4 different senses. Sight, sound, smell, and speech. Now, we all know that the name Yud K Vav K has 4 letters to it. They are, of course, Yud and K and Vav and K. And they correspond to these 4 senses. And to jump the gun, we're going to learn that these 4 senses correspond to 4 different realms in the human experience. Call it the spiritual and the intellectual, the emotional and the physical. And that they correspond to 4 different domains and principles, called Atzilut and Biriyah, Yitzirah and Asiyah, and God's light is within them all. So if I want to refer to God's light at one of these different ways, how or what kind of symbol can I use to distinguish in easy visual form a reference that will clearly indicate what something means and what something else means? And what we've come up with is a system of expanded spellings. Expanded spellings. Oh, I made a mistake in the Pythagorean theorem. It's A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Right, the first time, right? Squared plus, not multiplied, squared equals C. Okay, so shows you how much I know in my math here. But whatever. Okay, but getting back to our symbols here. When I want to describe the symbols, I want to describe God's name. I want to describe God's light, God's movement, God's activity. God Himself, as it is functioning in one of these realities. I take the name of God, Yud-Keh Vav-Keh, and I can spell each of the letters of the name. So the letter Yud, I can spell Yud, Vav, Dalet, Yud. The letter Hey, how do you spell a Hey? There's actually three ways you could spell the letter Hey. You could spell it as Hey Yud, Hey Aleph, or Hey Hey. And the letter Vav, I can spell as Vav Yud Vav, or Vav Aleph Vav, or Vav Vav. Final Hey gets spelled in the same three ways as I spell the first Hey. Well, in the combinations thereof, we can therefore form 4 different ways to spell out the letters of God's name. When we spell it Yud Vav Dalet, and then Hey Yud, Vav Yud, Vav Hey Yud, you add up the numerical value of each and all of those 10 letters, and you'll get the value of 72. 70 in Hebrew is spelled with the letter Ayin, 2 is the letter Bet. So you refer to that spelling, all with the Yuds, that's called Havaya. The name Yud-Keh Vav-Keh is referred to as a Havaya, because we can't say the name Yud-Keh Vav-Keh. So we spell it Hey, Vav, right? Yud, Hey, Havaya. And it's spelling of 72, spelled out like that. And that's Ayin and Bet. So we refer to that spelling as Ab. Next, you can spell Yud Vav Dalet Hey Yud again, but this time let's change the Vav. Spell it Vav Aleph Vav, and then Hey Yud again. Numerical value 63. Letters in Hebrew are Samech and Gimel. That's called Sag. That's called the Havaya of Sag. Next, being that we put the Aleph in the Vav, let's put the Aleph in the Heys. So we have Yud Vav Dalet, that's always spelled the same. Then Hey Aleph, Vav Aleph, Vav, Hey Aleph, numerical value 45, in Hebrew Mem and Hey, it's called Ma. And then finally, just spell the letters by themselves. Yud Vav Dalet again, Hey Hey, Vav Vav, Hey Hey, numerical value 52. Ben, now normally that would be Nun and Bet, Nob, but being that it's spelled, this word for son, Ben, it's referred to as Ben or Ben, Bet, Nun, Ben. Ashkenazim say Bon, but that is not the proper correct way. So we have these 4 different ways of spelling God's name. Numerical values 72, 63, 45, and 52. They are symbols no different from E equals MC squared, or A squared plus B squared equals C squared, Pythagorean theorem. Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben, they're just symbols. And that is what we must remember. Stop trying to think that A, they're holy names. They're not. Just no more than E has any relationship to energy. We are using these to help us understand the nature of the expression of the spiritual evolution. This Hishtalshalut is what we've spoken. Now, all of these materials you will find outlined in print, in writing, in my ebook called Basic Kabbalistic Concepts and Terminology. It's available on KosherTorah. Go get it from there. Because to memorize all these symbols is kind of like to memorize all the different formulas that you might have in algebra or geometry and the like. It requires, time and effort. So, give yourself that ability. Now, with regards to these 4, it states here something interesting. The 4 letters of Yud-Keh Vav-Keh. Alright, blessed be He. are spelled out in 4 different ways, Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben, and they refer to or correlate to the 4 different parts of letters, which are Ta'amim, the cantillation sound of how they are chanted, Nikudot, the vowels that go up and down and around the letters, Tagin, little crowns on top of the letters, and Otiot, the form of the letters themselves. Whoa, this is called, again, there are 4 levels. Ta'amim, with a tet in Hebrew, Nun for Nikudot, the vowels, Tab, Tagin, the crowns, and Aleph, the Otiot or letters. So to take the 4 capital letters, the Tet and the Nun, and the Tav and the Aleph, we call that TaNTA. TaNTA. This is referring to the letters. Wait a second, we were talking about God. We're talking about God's light. Talking about these senses. Where the heck do all these letters come from? I don't understand how we jumped from apples to oranges. Oh, really? You don't? Let me explain. What are we talking about? Revelation. Yeah, okay, got that. What is revelation? Revealing things. What is revealing things? Taking something from the dark and bringing it to the light. Alright, how do I do that? Well, from our human point of view, I would assume that the best way to do that is to talk about it. Speak. Reveal. Through words. Through speech. Well, when I speak, what am I speaking? Words. What are words made up of? Letters. And letters in the written form have crowns on them. And letters require there to be vowels in order to pronounce them. And when they are of Torah, they have cantillation sounds, which are chanting, which adds emphasis of passion and energy and depth beyond the limitation of their rational analytical form. So, that is why at this point, when we're discussing 4 senses, 4 names of God, we're introducing equally 4 structures corresponding to words. Okay? And interesting. What sense of our senses are words associated with? Is it the sense of taste? No, I don't think so. Is it the sense of smell? No, I don't think so. Is it the sense of sight? No, not usually. Let's leave it blank for right there, and let's go back to our text. Of these 4 letters, these 4 spellings of the name of God, we're now going to apply them as they are correlated to our symbolic body of the primordial man. The highest level called Ab, the spelling of God's name of 72. We're going to say corresponds to the Golgolet. The Golgolet is kind of like the skull, the head. Ab, the Golgolet. The name of 72 corresponds to the level of the skull, the head. The Anafav Ne'elamim. And all of its branches are concealed. So this level called Ab represents that area of which is concealed in the head. You know, we call that in psychology, we call that the unconscious. And that is why Ab corresponds to the domain of the unconscious within the mind. It is concealed. But is there any revelation from it? Yes, there is. Min hasarot shel rosh hem yotzim. From the hairs of the head, it comes out. You realize what we're saying? The hairs on your head are revealing the concealed lights of the Ab of Ak. Wow, that's profound. Oh, really? What the heck does it mean? Do you really think that your hair is a source of unconscious manifestation of your internal psyche? Gee whiz, what does that mean if you got a haircut? Come on. Recognize this again as a symbolic metaphor. The hair grows out of the head and flows down, more so the back than the front. That is symbolically the same way how the unconscious emanates forth out of the conscious mind, out of the body, and, if you will, symbolically speaking, flows down into the body from behind, meaning from the unconscious, motivating us. So the concept of hair is just a symbolic representation of the influence of the unconscious mind, here represented by the name of God, the spelling 72, Ayin Bet Ab. Unconscious, and yet influential, but only from the domain which is concealed. Well, if that's the case, what comes next? The answer? Yatsa Sag. The next name of God, and its spelling is called Sag, 63. This is the first level of materialization, manifestation. It states here that this light comes out of the ears of Adam Kadmon. Wow, how profound. What does that mean? The light of the Sag of Ak emanating from the ears. Well, to what do we correspond hearing? Well, we just said words, speech, letters, and the like. I guess that's why we're talking about TaNTA, Ta'amim, Nikodot, Tagin, and Otiot. Right? This is what's heard. And yet also what comes out of the ear, or corresponds to it, is the level in the realm of comprehension. So then, what is the highest level of the supernal man? Answer: conscious comprehension. Well, guess what? Just like that would be true in the image of supernal man and deeper psychological domains, so it is with us in this conscious world. Our highest level of conscious acquisition comes from that which we are able to understand in the mind. So, this concept of understanding, which is Sag, which we correlate to the sense of hearing, we say is divided in itself into three different forms. And it's referred to as here, and I'll read, Ta'amim Shelo Shlosha Minim. It now refers to the Ta'amim of the song. Now, wait a second, what were those Ta'amim again? That was the cantillations. What was that symbolism referring to? Oh, yeah, that's right. The spelling of the name of God of 72. And that spelling of the name of God of 72, oh gee, what does that mean again? Oh, that's right. The unconscious level. So then, this level of Sag, which is the first level of understanding, the first thing it materializes is the Ab of Sag, or the Ta'amim of the Sag. The unconscious source of all consciousness to come. There you go. Shouldn't be that hard to understand. And he says it's divided into 3 different levels. The upper level, the lower level, the middle level. And these are referred to as the ta'amim that are above, in the ears, the ta'amim that are in the middle, corresponding symbolically to the nose, and the ta'amim below, corresponding to the mouth. What on earth are we talking about? Again, unconscious motivation of understanding materializes itself first in the faculty of thought, and then proceeds to become more experiential until such a time it materializes into the finite form of a constructed idea which can be verbalized and spoken. That's the true understanding of this. Now again, remember, Rabbi Chaim Vital, the source of this material, probably would meditate like the Ari, his teacher before him. He would have an image of a human figure, maybe. And he would see lights emanating out from the ears and the nose and the mouth, and he would contemplate, what am I seeing? And he would come and apply all this symbolic language to it and understand it within the context that he is able to understand it, and yet write down the visions for us, and thus we have the Kitvei Ha'ari. And it's very possible that they themselves never grasped the psychological archetypal component of this, as 100 or so years later the Baal Shem Tov understood within it. The Arizal and Reb Chaim very well might have understood it like that. We don't know. They didn't say or not say. Reb Chaim Vital said. So, following along with our metaphors, it states, Yotzu ta'amim elyunim min ha'oznaim. The upper level of the cantillations, forget that they're cantillations, just refer to them as ta'amim, comes forth from the ears. What comes forth from the ears? But what comes forth from anything? Obviously the supernal pattern. And what is that pattern again? 10 Sefirot. How many ears do we have? 2. So that means what? As it says here, I have 10 Sefirot that come forth from the right ear, and then 10 Sefirot which come forth from the left ear. It says, Elu penimiim, ve'elu makifim legabehem. We state here that the Sefirot, you have those which are internal, and those which are external surrounding it. Well, that's also confusing. Why do I have to have 2? The answer is because Adam Kadmon has an inside and an outside. And the relationship of Adam Kadmon to the darkness around him, called the Ein Sof, is kind of like an inside and an outside. So everything is following this inside and outside pattern. Do we have an inside and an outside? Conscious mind, unconscious mind? Yeah. Physical world, spiritual world? Yeah. Body and soul? Yeah. Everything is following in a traditional pattern. Revealed, concealed, concealed, revealed. Up and down. Call it whatever you want. It's the same thing. So, the light of the ears comes out from the right ear, comes out from the left ear. Okay? And they say that they are all summed up in the letter Hey of God's name, which, as you know, is written as the 2 Hebrew letters Dalet and Vav. And it says that the lights of this ear come forth and descend to the tip of the supernal beard, Shibolet Hazakam. And again you're going, okay, literal, right? No! Nothing literal here at all. It's referring to the process of the revelation of intellectual thoughts and how intellectual thought exists in its primordial stage as having both an internal and external content, which at the first stages of thought have not been integrated together. This is the difference between an idea in theory and an idea in practice. While you're still contemplating them, they are miles apart, or if you will, symbolically, coming out of the right ear and the left ear. Now, both your theory of the idea and the later practice of the idea might very well be a comprehensive and complete thought, symbolic of the Sefirot, 10 Sefirot. And yet, theory and practice don't match up. So then, what's next? Yotzu ta'amim emtsa'im min hachotem. Symbolically now, the process of thought that is so abstractly different between the theory and the practice has to become a little bit closer. And therefore we ascribe that this closeness happens in the metaphorical symbolic nose. Because the ears are opposite sides of the head, whereas the nostrils are only separated by the septum in between. So therefore, the middle ta'amim emanate from the metaphorical symbolic nose, 10 sefirot from the right nostril, 10 sefirot from the left nostril. And it says here that the sefirot are starting to get closer one to another. Rab Chaim makes another reference here, which I'm going to skip just for the sake of brevity because we're running short on time. This is the process of the lights of the ears, the nose, and the mouth. The ears are again oznaim with the letter aleph. The nose is the chotem with the letter het. And the mouth is the pei with the letter pei. Take the aleph and the het and the pei, and together this process is called the lights of the AhaF. That's all the fancy shorthand language that the Kabbalists use. So now let's move on. What happens now to the light? The process of thought needs to congeal into a comprehensive, solidified form which can give rise to a course of action. Because if you have varying thoughts in your head, one way you're saying, well, maybe it'll be like this. The other way, no, I think it's going to be like that. What do you end up doing? Well, you haven't made up your mind yet, and therefore nothing gets done. The symbol of the nose, and it is smelling, indicates a beginning experience of the external world and its allowance, or I should say, it influencing internal decision. But now let's move to the final level. It's called the lower ta'amim, and these emanate forth from the mouth. Now, here you have the 10 sefirot internal and the 10 sefirot surrounding them, that they are now joined together. Again, Reb Chaim gives a metaphor symbol here, which I'm going to just skip. Because he states here that the lights that were originally so separated in the ears, and the lights that were so separated still by the septum and the nose, now all of them are starting to come together in the mouth. And this light goes all the way down to the belly button. So what on earth are we talking about? Like I said, the process of thought. The process of thought, understanding, corresponds to the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is spelled 63 or Sag. And this process from its unconscious source materializes first in the construct of the theory of thought or action, which is symbolic of the ears, which then gets closer to materialization by an experience of the outer world, symbolic of smell, until finally the theory, the practice, can be put together as a single plan. And that's called the lights of the mouth, where in which all of these sephirot come together. That is the lights of the AhaF, explained real simple. It's the process of the birth of the intellect and its first step into experiencing and interacting with the greater outside world. Continuing, it states, Yotzu Pam Rishona Malchut Batchila. It states that the way that the Sephirot came forth from the mouth was that the Malchut, which is the last Sephirah, came forth first. Position and Markilama, the Zah, right, comes out, the Yesod comes out after the Malchut, and that's how it is until you get to Keter. So normally we speak of the revelation of the lights of the Sephirot from above to below. But when we speak of the lights that come forth from the mouth, materialization of thought into form, the first thing that materializes is the structure, the form, symbolized by the Sephirot Malchut. And then the other Sephirot begin to materialize. And that means essentially the path, the ladder of ascent, which we make as human beings in our pursuit of greater spiritual truths. We start from the bottom, we work our way up. We start from a point of consciousness in this world, and we try to transcend to get into experiencing other realms, domains, for the like of experience. So when the, in quote, lights of the mouth of Adam Kadmon come forth, rather than the Keter, the concealed, come forth, on the contrary, the physical comes forth, Malchut. And we say, I have an idea. This is it. And then I build my idea. Motivating pattern, intellectual reasoning behind it, maybe a push my intuitive. All of these are what we call the Apsag Man Ben of the light of the mouth. And here they come out from the structured form first to the higher, more abstract form last. And it states here, V'koach hakli balua behem hadak shebehem chazav v'nichnas. Okay. The lights that we referred to as emanating from the opposite ears, the opposite nostrils, the theory and the practice, here in the mouth form what is called light and vessel. This is the beginning of what we refer to as body and soul, inner and outer, right? In other words, to every thought, to every deed, to every action, there is an inner and an outer. You're obviously doing something, but what are the motivations? What's the potential and the power behind it? There's an inner, in quote, light to it. So what happens is, at this point, in this theoretical expression in the most deepest construct of the unconscious self, wherein which the beginning of thought is materializing, what you have here is an integration and bringing together, again, of this theory and practice into the form of the mouth. But at this level of theory, the practice and the theory are so clearly demarcated and distinguishable. I sometimes, when I look out in this state of mind, can think of fantasies and think of them as being real. So, for example, if I am sitting contemplating a thought, let's think of something simple. I'm sitting outside and I say, I have to, build a fence. So how do you build a fence? You're going to go and you're going to lay down posts. Then you're going to either put up a fence or wire or something. Very practical. But no. You know how I think? I think I'm just going to meditate on it and materialize the fence materials out of thin air. Oh, really? I don't think that's the way it's going to work. And if you really want to get it done, I think you have to be a little bit more practical. But if I can't distinguish between theory and practice, because it's all the same to me, well then what do I do? This is a very interesting symbol that Rab Chaim now describes. He says, being that the light and the vessel, the theory and the practice, are indistinguishable at this most fundamental level of the materialization of thought, we have to distinguish between them. So he states that the light within the vessel goes back up into the mouth of Adam Kadmon. The Keter, which we said was the last light to come out, goes back up first. And that's how it is with all of them. Until ultimately, you take out the last light from the last vessel, which is the vessel of Malchut. And then all of a sudden, the lights come back in. And you have the concept of light ascending back up into the breath, and the light coming back down out. What you have here is the symbolic movement of breath. This movement of breath, in which the light that originally inhaled and went up is not the same as the light that exhaled out. Because we say that the one light, the Keter, didn't come back, but rather the light of the Chokhmah filled the vessel of the Keter. The light of the Bina filled the vessel of the Chokhmah, and on, till ultimately you get down to the level of the Malchut, and it was left without any light of its own, and it was a reflection of above. But this state of imbalance between the inner and outer stabilized a relationship which created the original structure or form of that which we call an idea, and the essence and the light within it, which we call the theory, becomes secondary to the importance of the actuality, which is the form of the vessel. So here, we're taking all of these symbolisms and trying to translate them into a reality which makes sense to us. And this was the original construct of form, the form being the first conscious thought. At first, it states here, they were all at the level of the nefesh level of soul, the fundamental life force component. And it says here, everyone benefited from the fact that they came forth and from their return. Alright, each one in its place. And it helped solidify. It goes into a very detailed way of how each light surrounds and forms a structure of its own, and that all of this combined, where in which all the lights, all the forms, all the potential materialization and differentiation were nonetheless still solidified in a single form which has not yet become materialized as the ultimate parts. We're still in a seed-like kernel of everything bound together. And it hasn't differentiated yet into the multiple diversities of materialization and action. And being that this thought or this light of the mouth is so concentrated, so bound together, he refers to it as being bound. And symbolically, this is called the world, the domain, the level of the akudim, the bound. Because this process of the materialization, the manifestation of thought, begins in the kernel, seed-like form of undifferentiation. We worked so hard to distinguish between conscious and unconscious content, theory and practice. And yet now, the practice is all rolled up into a little itsy-bitsy seed, waiting to be manifest. And that concludes the first chapter of this review of ours. In our next chapter, now that we've revealed the true meaning of the lights, as we call them, of the ears and the nose and the mouth, called the AhaF, what comes next is going to be the light of the eyes. And we'll discuss that in our next class. Alrighty, guys, on that note, we've gone a little bit over time here, so I want to thank you again all for joining me. I hope I will see you all in our next class. Again, I'm your host, Ariel Tzadok. Come see me online at KosherTorah.com. God bless. Good night. And in a minute, shalom, because I see there are a couple of questions here in the text. And for those who are my live students here, I will endeavor to read your questions and answer them. And for those of you who are listening to the recording, maybe this should motivate you to come join us live. See you all next class. Shalom. 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 See you all next class. Shalom.